This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, this is Karen Cook from the Home Modification Occupational Therapy Alliance, HMOTA, and thank you for coming today. So before we get going, I want to introduce the Home Modification Occupational Therapy Alliance, or HMOTA, to everyone who's here. HMOTA's objectives are to promote occupational therapists as leaders in the home modification space and to build our market with quality and consistency. The other objective is to develop a lucrative business model for home mod OT businesses to have income streams that people can access through HMOTA for their businesses and to promote the research. We also do a lot of education because if we're going to really rise to the occasion and meet our market and really dominate the home mod market, then we need to know what we're doing. And that's based on research. Thank you to everyone who is standing up and being a part of HMOTA, doing these evaluations, working with our mentors. So thank you so much. So I'm going to turn my camera off, and Felice, if you turn your camera off, we can get going with the presentation. So I thought what we could do, and I'm going to go through and mute a few people real quick. So there's different kinds of lifts, and when you're thinking about recommending a lift, you need to look at the different kinds of lifts that are available and make decisions based on that. So first and foremost is what we do as OTs, and people really look to us to do, is to make recommendations to make homes accessible. So when we're looking at what kind of lift should we recommend for someone, we really need to look at what different points on different kinds of lifts. So I thought I would start with the freestanding lift, the patient floor lift, or the Hoyer lift. Those are the different things I tend to hear them called. In this picture, it's kind of nice because it has different measurements. 51 inches for the forks. That I find it's 51 to 60 inches for the forks usually. Then the height of the lift itself. This one is pretty standard, 53 to 54 inches. But then you have to look at the range of this is called the boom. The horizontal part of the lift is called the boom. So with the ceiling lifts, you really have to, or for floor mounted lifts or freestanding lifts, you really have to pay attention. What is the range of the boom? And what are you trying to pick the person up from? Sometimes if it's a tall bed, you can't get the boom high enough, especially in something like a manufactured home or a trailer where the ceilings are a little bit lower. So before you recommend a floor lift, make sure that it's one that can work with whatever you have going. So if you're in a trailer and the boom won't go all the way up, which I've had with myself, you're going to have to look at lowering the bed, which again makes for an issue for people who are, say, changing someone's diaper because they're going to have to bend over a lot more. But so with the freestanding lifts, there are some things that are nice about them. They're portable. You can take them into any room whatsoever, but make sure that they fit in the area that you're going to be in. And all the different lifts have their own weight capacities. So when when you're recommending lifts, always check and see what your client's weight is. And if you're going to submit a request for a ceiling lift, make sure that the vendor knows. They'll probably ask you anyway what the weight of the person is.
Karen, can I
So
ask a real quick question about the radius? Like when you're, how much floor space do you need for those? Like when you're, is it more than the 5 foot radius or
yeah,
diameter?
it is. For instance, if you're going to get someone in and out of bed, it's got to go underneath the bed, and then you've got to pull it out the entire length of the forks, and then be able to turn it. So, for instance, this one has 51-inch forks. You definitely would need. I would want to go no less than a 60-inch circle. But and then of course you got to make sure whatever it is you're going into, like if it's you've got to have a 60-inch circle to pull it out and turn the lift. But then if you're going to put someone in a wheelchair, the lift is going to have you're going to have to turn it and then go into the wheelchair as well. So it's more like a 10-foot circle, I would say, that you need, because you need to be able to go in underneath, say, a bed, pull it out, turn it, and then push it into a wheelchair. If that makes any sense whatsoever. You've got to have
Yes,
enough
thank
room in the home for the wheelchair, in the room for the wheelchair, and for the bed to go on, or for the lift to go, the ceiling lift to go under the bed, or the couch or whatever. And if you're going to recommend this for somebody who wants to sit on a couch, because I have run into that several times, where especially teenagers, they want to sit on the couch with everybody else. It's about, I always figure it's got to be at least a 6-inch rise between the floor and whatever it is you're rolling this lift under. So a lot of times with a couch or something like that, you're going to need risers as well. So you can get the couch up high enough, at least 4-inch risers. So you can get the couch up high enough to slide the lift under. And again, this is something you really need to think about with a floor lift. You need the floor space. You need to make sure the object that you're rolling, you want to get the person in and out of, is high enough. You got to look at the ceiling height, the caregiver's strength. It takes a lot more strength to push somebody using these freestanding lifts than it does for a ceiling lift. And the other thing that I always look for when I'm looking at these patient lifts, these freestanding lifts, is what kind of flooring is it? Pushing someone, especially someone who weighs about the same as the caregiver, on carpet, even if it's low pile carpet, can be really very difficult. So one thing we've done before is we'll either put in large office mats or just get a piece of linoleum and put that down over the floor if we can't actually change the entire flooring, because these can be very difficult to move.
And the other thing I kind of think with these two, if you don't mind me interjecting again, is that I feel like two caregivers are the safer way to go. Trying to do
Why?
this with one person, just to be able to position them on one person to position the other one to manage the controls.
Right, right. Agreed. Anyone else have experiences with the freestanding lifts they might want to share?
This is Amber. I do find that the power lifts are much, much easier for one caregiver than the
Oh,
manual, right? There's just too many things to do at one time with the manual. But in my office, I can rotate the person and deal with the Hoyer, and I'm probably in like a 4x4 space. It's brutal, though, trying to get around everything.
nice.
I find this is Jennifer. I find that using the crank lifts creates a lot of fear with the patient if you don't give them a lot of prep too, versus because the smoothness is really not there.
Good point.
Hi, this is Jen. I would say another thing I experienced when I worked in home health is the flexibility of our patients' knees. Trying to spin them around the boom or around the lift portion, the stand-up portion, or the flexibility of their ankles, it can be very painful for patients to try to actually spin them safely.
That's a really good point. I never even thought about that. Anyone else? There is definitely a lot to take into consideration. The other nice thing about these freestanding lifts is many times Medicaid will pay for them, and Medicare, and everybody's different. I find every state is different, especially with Medicaid as far as what they pay for. I should say in Michigan, I find that Medicaid will pay for an electric patient lift. Medicare, I also find that people have electric lifts that Medicare pays for. Has anybody experienced anything different with that?
Karen, this is Linda. In Florida, I know, well, for us with Medicare, the patients I've had, the Medicare will pay up to the cost of the manual Hoyer, and family has to pay out of pocket for the difference for the electric, if they want the electric version versus the manual.
I didn't even know they'd let them do that. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually only one code for a Hoyer lift. And so what's probably happening is the company is billing Medicare for the manual Hoyer and then doing the extra rental or payment for the electric, but they have to be super careful because some of them you can't charge the patients anything extra. You know, a lot of the private insurances and certainly Medicaid.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was that way with Medicare too, but I'm not real versed in Medicare. So then but the main lifts that we're going to talk about tonight, I just felt like there's no way we can ignore the freestanding lifts, especially since those are the ones that are typically reimbursed by Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurances. The ceiling lifts, I haven't found any insurances that will pay for them other than workers' comp. So I usually get them funded through workers' comp. The VA will pay for them. Um, Auto no fault would pay for them. And then Medicaid waivers. I haven't had any luck at all. And please, if anybody else has, let me know. Getting ceiling lifts paid for by private insurance, regular Medicaid, or regular Medicare. So this picture is from one of the jobs we did, and this is obviously a fixed track ceiling lift. And the thing is with these fixed tracks or even if you've got a traverse track that communicates with another room, the issue with that is you have to modify the header, and the header is the part in front and above the door. People don't like having these headers modified because it decreases the value of the house, and B, you don't have a lot of privacy when you modify the header like this. It's really difficult to prevent people from hearing what's going on in the room. We've tried things before where we've done um, like different kinds of gaskets or rubber that we'll put up to help keep things quiet as far as noise control, but even those don't work that well. So that is one big issue with the ceiling lifts. We're going to talk about how to run a ceiling lift and different ways to be able to use the lift along with other kinds of equipment. Ceiling lifts are very expensive. The cheapest kind of ceiling lift is the ceiling lift that's just one straight track. The turns for the ceiling lift are usually at least, I don't know, $1,500 to $2,000. There's also other things like turntables and different devices along those lines. So things can get expensive really fast with ceiling lifts. The cheapest ceiling lift I've ever installed was about 8,000. The most expensive ceiling lift I've ever installed was about 17,000, and that was just for the ceiling lift installation. That wasn't for modifying any headers. That wasn't for any of the electrical work. That was just for the ceiling lift. So when you're thinking about recommending a ceiling lift, take a look at how you're going to want it to run. And again, we'll talk about that in more detail, but try to avoid turns. If there's going to be a lot of turns, maybe you want to look at something else called a transverse ceiling lift, which we'll talk about later. The other thing you have to look at is the ceiling substrate. Some ceiling lifts you can mount with a drop ceiling, and in order to do that, there's got to be what they call a pendant that comes down for the drop ceiling. But most of the time, though, if you're going to be putting in a ceiling lift, you should you should find out, is there attic access? Because if there's attic access, then you got a better chance of being able to install the ceiling lift. And then they also, you know, and installers might want to know, is it trusses or is it joints or ceiling joists? Ceiling joists are usually 2x6s or 2x10s that run the length of the ceiling. They're usually about 16 inches on center apart. What a truss is they're shaped like triangles, and they hold up the roof. And typically, they've been engineered to be able to take different loads. Another thing you need to look at when you're thinking of doing a ceiling lift between rooms is differing ceiling heights. So sometimes you might need to drop, and most of these ceiling lifts with the fixed tracks, you can drop the track. They've got different brackets so you've got different, so you have different heights or different lengths away from the ceiling in which you can mount the track, which is very helpful. You do have cathedral ceilings, you cannot do a ceiling lift with. Sloped ceilings, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, depending on how tall the ceiling is and what the slope is. For that, we always have to talk with whoever it is we're working with. But if you're doing an evaluation for somebody and they've got a sloped ceiling, first thing you need to do is sketch out, make a square box if it's a square room, and put in the measurements for the walls, how long the length and width of the room is, and then how tall the ceiling is on each side of the room. So that way the ceiling lift company can compute what the slope would be and let you know if it's something that they can do. The other issue we've had is trailers and manufactured homes typically don't always have the proper ceiling joists or blocking that we can put into the ceilings. And for them, we can't always do a ceiling lift. And we can there's a lot of there's some other options for these overhead lifts, but that is one thing you have to really be careful of. The other problem that we talked about earlier with the floor lifts is, sometimes trailers especially will have too low of a ceiling height to be able to use them effectively. So what's the difference between this isn't centered the way I thought it was. So what's the difference between a floor lift and an overhead lift when you're really looking at what should I be prescribing my client? One is insurance, money, funding source. What is their funding source? If they don't have a funding source other than insurance, Medicaid or Medicare, then they're going to be paying out of pocket. And so that is definitely something to look at. Floor space or storage space. Is there enough floor space to be able to use the lift? And is there a place to store the lift? That storage can be a big deal, as we all know, with people, especially who have severe physical handicaps. They have a lot of equipment. So storage is definitely an issue. The flooring, again, I just want to throw out as a huge issue for the overhead lift versus the floor lift. And sometimes if people are paying out of pocket, the cost to get a floor lift, also you have to take into account the cost for possibly changing the flooring. Again, a really cheap way is just get a piece of linoleum and put that down over the carpet, but that's less than ideal. That's just a very cheap way. Most of the time, if people are using a floor lift, I'm really trying to encourage them to change out the flooring, and the cost of flooring may make the ceiling lift feel like a little bit more feasible for people. And this is something Amber brought up. For a floor lift versus an overhead lift, a 2-person operation versus a 3-person operation. And in this particular graphic, for a floor lift, they do believe you need two people to operate it. I think we've all done 1-person floor lift operations before. But as we know, it's not always easy. Can you take a floor lift versus an overhead lift on vacation to a hotel? It depends on what kind of lift. For both of them, I've seen portable overhead lifts and I've seen portable floor lifts. Strength or exertion with the overhead lifts, they're wonderful for people who are large and have small caregivers, or people who have caregivers who are really not that strong. With a floor lift, again, especially depending on the weight of the person, it can be moderate to severe amount of effort. And, I really feel quite strongly when we're doing these home modifications and redesigning homes, of course, we're doing it to increase the function of the client, but the caregivers are just as important, because without those caregivers to help take care of these clients, they can't stay in their homes. And then the other one was for an overhead lift, is it in arm's reach? Can you just reach over and grab it? Whereas a freestanding lift, you cannot always just reach over and grab it. But even with an overhead lift, it depends on where that lift is stored. So I want to show you some videos, and this is what really disappointed me last week, because I felt like she had some decent information, but her information wasn't always, oh my gosh. But her issue was, or I felt like she didn't always tell us exactly, she was telling us where it would have been nice to show us. So just one second. I thought I had this all queued up. So I thought this is a good video, because it really kind of talks about, it shows how the different lifts work.
Somebody with a pretty significant stroke or spinal cord injury or brain injury, a lot of times
So she's saying, when you're trying to decide whether or not you need a ceiling lift or even a lift in general, lifts are typically used more for people with severe disabilities, people who can do a standing pivot transfer, even if it's max assist. Well, max assist people often want to use a lift. But I'll tell you what, I find, and please let me know what your thoughts are, but I find that even if it's someone who is a moderate to maximum assist for a standing pivot, people tend to do the standing pivot transfers or actually lift the person before they use it, instead of using a lift, because lifts take too much time. And so, one thing is, it's always nice too if people can trial the lifts, because it's just so sad how much adaptive equipment just sits by the side. So again, with her, she's talking about people with limited mobility, stroke, spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, amputees, and progressive conditions like ALS or muscular dystrophy. That's one thing we really do a lot with our muscular dystrophy kids is, what's the lift program? A lot of the parents don't have a lot of money, so we use ceiling lifts sometimes to overcome architectural barriers as well. So the ceiling lifts can be used to raise a person, lower a person, lift a person, or roll a person.
Lift them from.
I'm sort of cheating, using her presentation without using her so much. Oh, I have no idea what's going on here. So what I really wanted to show you with the video, though, is they have some really good videos of, oh my gosh. Why does it skip to a different video? Okay. So I do want to show you how these work. And again, I'm so sorry about this. Nothing's going the way I want it to go.
Typically find lifts, in homes, hospitals. Is a track that we install.
So here's the fixed tracks. These are the tracks where, in order to install these, you have to have, or I strongly recommend, I do hear that you don't always have to have the attic access, although I'll tell you what, the guys I work with, they always want attic access if they're going to be installing these lifts. I've got a lot of guys who say, we can't get into the attic, we don't know what we're dealing with, we're not putting in the lift. So if you're going to do a lift, specifically these fixed track lifts, make sure that there's attic access. Ask your client, walk over, if it's easy, look and see what kind of attic access there is. I know that it's hard as an OT. It's not like we're carrying around ladders like the guys carry, but oftentimes people can say, oh yeah, there's attic access. Sometimes they can even let you see what that is. But the fixed tracks, again, the straight track is the most cost-effective way to run a track. Any kind of turn, it just doubles the cost of the track. And then there's also, with these ceiling lifts, for instance, here's the lift right here on the far right. And with this lift, there's two different ways to charge it. Some of them have a charger that you have to push this little motor into. It's usually mounted on the wall, so you have to push the motor into the charger. And that's something you remind people to do, because if they don't do it, the battery's going to die on the ceiling lift. And then there's also some where there's like a copper coil inside the track. It's called a track charger. So that way people don't have to worry about where the lift is on the track to have it charge. So then, and that's really the nicer way to go. The other thing with these ceiling lifts, they all have a battery that they use. So when you're not using the lift, if you've got it on the charger on the wall, or if it charges on the track, it's charging that battery. So that way, if you do lose power, you will still have usually several ups and downs that you can do with this lift, with these ceiling lifts. So even though you don't have power, it can still go up and down. That said, if your battery starts to die, you're not going to be able to use the lift. So what I do with my lifts quite a bit, and I do this with the freestanding lifts and with the ceiling lifts, I keep track of every time that I put a battery in. So I've got like 7 or 8 different clients. Every time, the batteries last about 2 years. So I have on my calendar every year and a half, every 18 months, where I just order a new battery, go out and put the battery in their lift for them, because it's so vitally important that they don't lose their ability to move this person with a lift. I learned that the hard way, where, I had to order a battery. It took 2 weeks to get in there, and the family was just losing it because they had no way to move the child without somebody helping them. So again, here's the headers. Here's another header that's been altered. How much you have to alter the header depends on the ceiling lift. This is the way they've got this header right here where it's so wide. Typically, they don't need to be that wide. I've got some where you only have to have 6 inches wide. Some of them have to be wider than that. So that's one thing that you have to talk with your ceiling lift company if you're going to be writing construction specifications for a builder to be installing these, because typically the guys who are installing the ceiling lifts don't have the skills or the desire to have to alter the header. So a lot of times, like for me, I've got guys who install the ceiling lifts, but I have to have my other guys alter the header. So I use different ceiling lifts. I use Handy Move. I use Hoycher, also barrier-free lifts is what they call themselves. And now we're getting into human care lifts. So whatever lift you're going to be using, you need to talk with the manufacturer and find out if it's going to run between rooms, and you're going to need to alter the header above the door. You need to be able to write in your construction specifications, even if you're not the builder, it'd be nice if you could do it, how wide that header has to be above the door. and where it needs to be located. Because, you know, one thing I always try to do, like for this ceiling lift, it looks a little crazy because it's so far over to the left. And I'm wondering why they have it located so far over to the left. It looks like it's going to be one of those tracks where you can, it's called a roomer, where it goes from one room to the other, and it does that by changing the strapping system. We'll see that later. But this one is just so far over. Typically, if you were going to alter a door header to get in, you do more in the middle, so that way people have a lot of space to get through. Oh, did I go backwards? I was hoping I thought they had one. Headers, no problem. And this again is, so the other thing you can get with ceiling lifts are portable ceiling lifts. And that's what I believe this is, where you lower it and then you just release it and then put it on a different track. I have a lot of times where the guys would recommend that, but I don't like doing that simply because it's a lot more work for the caregiver. So if there's any way I can ever avoid that, I try to really avoid that. So it's just one less thing for the caregiver to do. I listened to this already. These guys aren't saying anything that interesting. So this is one of the things, turntables are nice. I end up using these turntables quite a bit in bathrooms. And what it allows you to do is obviously connect with different kinds of, with different tracks that are oriented in different ways. So that way you can turn it. Oh, and look at this. They're going to do a little video.
Let's do the demo.
Sure.
Yeah.
So here's a ceiling lift. And this is one of the lifts that looks like, we'll talk about that later.
Okay, you can see how it changes directions there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all motorized, so
Correct.
not, so could the person actually who's in the lift control it, or is that generally controlled by the caregiver?
You can have it hanging for they can reach it as
Yeah,
well.
either.
Okay.
You can
Both, yeah.
you know, and
Okay, so the question they asked was for this. So with ceiling lifts, you can do, I don't know if I can make this work. For ceiling lifts, they've got 4 different things they can do. They can go up, they can go down, and then they can go forward and backward on the track. And it's all controlled with a remote. Most of the time, like 98% of the time, we only use the ceiling lifts that go up and down. We don't use the ones that go
bathroom, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then
that the client controls to go with the remote to go up and down the track. The reason we typically do not recommend, or I don't recommend the ceiling lifts that you can control with the remote to go up and down the track, you can't just push them up and down the track. If they've got the remote control track function on there, so the client could possibly move themselves down there, move themselves up and down the track, you can't push it. And the problem with these is they move really, really slow. And so a lot of times caregivers and clients don't like the ceiling lifts where you have to press the button to make it go like this laterally on the track. So there's the turntable.
Hey, Karen, Bridget asked, is a turntable more cost effective than a track that turns?
No, it's more expensive. But the nice thing about it is typically they use the turntables in places where there's like a 4-way turn. So people, you know, with a fixed track, you can go 90 degrees. But with a turntable, you can go 360. So a lot of times that will go between rooms. it just gives you a lot more options. Or I like to use the turntables when like when you go into the bathroom and you can go straight to the shower, and then I'll have a turntable in front of the toilet and the sink. So that way you can go towards the toilet and towards the sink. It just gives you a lot more options for the different ways you can move. So, and then here are some tracks that with the curves. Again, the curves are a lot less expensive than the turntables, but again, they're fixed. So you're just going where it is you want. And sometimes, and where it is you've already decided you want to be. You can't go someplace different like you can with a turntable. The thing with these fixed tracks too, one thing when I talk with people about putting in a ceiling lift, if it's going to be a fixed track ceiling lift, I always talk to them about furniture placement, because if it's a fixed track ceiling lift, then they're going to have to leave the furniture wherever it is we decided the furniture was supposed to be. And I had one client who kept trying to move their child to different rooms in the house, which made no sense to me. So we kept pulling the track out and putting it back in. They were lucky they had the budget to do that. But typically, once you get that in, everything stays exactly where it is.
Loved one that has this ability, it's good to talk. And this is another example of the ceiling track, which we call it. Is this one for the XY, right?
Yes.
The XY.
Also called a traverse,
lift, which covers the entire room, so you can go to any direction that you want. As you can see, it has a moving track that it moves front and back, and the motor will move left to right, so you can cover every inch of the room as much as we run the track to that area. So it's good for people that they want to transfer to two different areas. Like, for example, if they have a desk, they want to transfer the person sitting behind the desk so they can do their work. And then if they want to transfer to the wheelchair. So it's good for that you have multiple points in the room to transfer. So we call it XYZ system, but its parenting is XYZ because it can go all directions. It can go up and down, left and right, front and back. And if you have this, as you can see, this motor has we call it auto traverse, that it moves front and back with the remote. But there are units that they don't, if they want to save, they can just push the person and it doesn't go moving front and back. It's just for the lifting up and down. As you can see, and the same thing with these moving tracks. You can get those powered or you can get them manual.
I love that. So these traverse lifts are really nice as far as being able to access any place in the room. And we'll talk a little bit about those again in a minute. The other thing I really like about the traverse tracks is if you don't know what kind of substrate you have in the ceiling, or it can often be more cost effective to put a traverse lift in, or he called it an XYZ lift. We always call them transverse lifts. It can be more cost effective to put them in at sometimes, because what you can do is just put a wall mount bracket. You would just secure the ends of the transverse lift with brackets that fit onto the walls, so you don't have to worry about securing it to the ceiling.
Do you have any pictures of what that looks like? Things that are on the wall versus the ceiling?
I think let me look and see. I think I do. But we'll get into that a little bit more. I know I've got some somewhere, but hopefully I can find them for you today. But basically what they are is just, usually it's a lot of times a freestanding post. So it's just a piece of metal that goes down the wall and it fastens into the wall, the joists or the studs in the wall. But hopefully I've got one in one of these. Um, but basically, it's just a brace that goes down the wall. And there's also some that the braces just go right into the studs and they don't go all the way down the wall. All of them have different ways of doing it, but if you can anchor it into a wall instead of a ceiling, a lot of times that's a lot less expensive, especially if you have to put blocking in the ceiling. And that's when those transverse lifts come in. And I love the transverse lifts too, because then people can move this, you can move furniture around. It's not going to affect how well you can use the lift. So
Karen, it's Julie. I wanted to ask, how often do you do the portable lifts where you can, that have the frame
yeah,
versus permanent?
here's one right here. It's the Lena Freestand. They've got a few of them on the market. Honestly, the only time I've ever done these, um, you can get these that are portable, that are supposedly easy to pack up and take along. Never, ever, ever have I sold one. But these freestanding gantries that just go across the bed, I've sold a few of those just basically for people who they're less expensive than most ceiling lifts. And it's for people who the people I've sold them to have been private payers who needed something for their child, didn't have a room in the house that was big enough to use a freestanding lift. So they use these, they're called gantry lifts, just because they're cheap. They're really inexpensive. They're not crazy cheap, but they're a lot less expensive than anything where you have to install blocking in the walls, blocking in the ceiling. These just are freestanding lifts, and they don't take up a lot of space. But I haven't sold any portable lifts. Does anybody else deal with portable lifts? They're out there. So here's just one more video. There's so much going on as far as slings, but we can't get into that today. I just want to say though, like for me, when I'm deciding what sort of sling I'm going to be using with someone or what kind of contraption, this is one of my favorite things right here. It's called a body support. It's by Handy Move. Love these. It makes it really easy to get people in and out of wheelchairs. Bed's a little bit harder because they have to sit up. So if you've got a bed that automatically brings them up, it makes it easier. But these are for people who have higher, like normal to higher tone. I find work really well with this. I have done use these lifts with people who've had amputations. That has worked really well. But so, oops. And again, this is one that somebody is using a remote to control it. And just notice how slow it really goes. They sped it up there. But these are really, these supports are just beautiful and easy to use, and I love them. But you can't use them with anybody who's got anywhere near low tone. But I have run into it, and I'm sure you probably have too, Amber, where I've worked with somebody with multiple sclerosis or ALS, and they've got a lift, but they're not using it. And when I ask them, how come you're not using your lift? A lot of times it's something like, I can't use the lift because it doesn't work for me. And it's because the slings don't work.
Yeah, that's often the case. I mean, people uh get turned off about all the different lifts, right? Because they oftentimes just have the wrong sling. That
Right.
Sure Hands that you were just showing the video of, though, I have used it and seen it used with higher level tetraplegic, quadriplegic, like C6, C7. And that woman that in that video was at that level. You could see in her hands. Now, she may have been slightly incomplete, but it holds them tightly enough at the ribs that they'll sag a little bit, but they're generally not going to fall out.
Yeah. I find, yeah, I'm glad you've had some success with that. The people that I've tried to use these lifts with who are low tone, I find get scared because they start to sag. But yeah, so
Yeah,
this,
good point.
but I mean, everybody's different. And ideally, like for these lifts too, unless I really feel like they've got the tone to use these lifts, if I have any concern whatsoever, I'll get a hold of the company and say, hey, I need you to bring out this body support and see which one works. And I like to do that with other slings as well. Sometimes they'll let you do that. This is called a boom lift. These got really popular. Maybe, let's see, like 5 years ago. These were like all the rage. Everybody was talking about these boom lifts. I don't ever see them anymore. But just so you know what they look like. And, I really like the way they're using this one for a hot tub access. It seems like it's nicer than a ceiling lift would be. But yeah, so that's a boom lift. And one thing, for instance, I install a lot of these handy move lifts for people who never for a pool and never one like this, but the handy move in general with the body support sling. With the body support slings only work with the handy move lifts. And so I do install a lot of those if that's something you want. All I did was I found the handy move dealer closest to me and then called them and made a relationship with them. So they gave me discounts. So I'm basically a salesperson for them. I get 25% off anything I order. And that works out well because then we can just charge the client, the 25% more, the 25% that I get my deal on. And that way everybody makes a little bit of money. So we as OTs, we need to know how to use these lifts. And this woman is going to talk a little bit about how to use the ceiling lifts. And she's going to show you some of the different slings. And I think some of the different slings are really good to know because it can influence what is best and most therapeutic for your client. So I'm going to have her explain to you a little bit about how the ceiling lifts work.
Basic functions of the overhead patient lifts. First, our patient lifts come in a weight capacity of 440 pounds up to a dual motor option of 1,100 pounds. If you would like to know what weight capacity your system is, please refer to the product label on the side of the unit for your weight capacity. There's also an emergency stop located on the overhead lift system. The emergency stop is activated by pulling on the red string of the overhead lift system, and it will activate the emergency.
If it's not a red string, a lot of times it's a red button, and they have it to where you can reach it. But typically, it's a red string that you'll see.
Emergency stop. The red emergency stop button does need to be deactivated for the lift to start working again. Overhead lifts are operated by a hand control. The hand control will operate the lift sling bar going up and down, which picks up your patient up and down. The movement of the sling bar left and right will be done by the caregiver, moving the actual motor in the rail, depending on your configuration, from left to right or front to back. It's also important to know that the sling bar will also go all the way down to the ground, so you can do floor rescues if necessary. Your overhead lift may charge via wall mount hand charger using the hand control plugged into a wall mounted charger, or it could be done via in-rail charging where it's always charging. If you do have a wall mounted hand control, which would look like this, you would take your hand control and you would actually place the hand control inside the wall mounted charger. The lights will show up. If it is a green light showing up, then you know that your battery is fully charged and your battery is good. If it's a green and yellow light, you know that your battery is charging and that it's accepting a charge. If you have a white light, your white light tells you that you may have a problem with your motor and you should call Biomed or facilities for repair. Your overhead lift system is designed to do a variety of overhead lifting activities, including boosting, turning, seated transfers, and ambulation, to name a few. Now we're going to go ahead and show you how to transfer a patient from bed to chair using a seated sling. This can be used on a Golbo, the Viking, and the overhead lifts. This yellow stripe on the back is just means it's a medium, but it also is a nice indicator to where I need to line up behind the patient right along the spine so I can get that nice and lined up. So I'm going to go ahead and I fold the sling in half. I'm going to go ahead and put it behind the patient, and then I'm just going to take the folded half and move it around the patient so it's nice and lined up. Again, taking that line.
And that is really important for us as OTs, is to show people how to put the slings on.
And I'm going to tuck it just to her tailbone and get that there. So I'm going to go ahead and ask her to sit back. And then we're going to take our leg straps. I'm going to roll that leg strap underneath. And then I'm going to tuck it here. I'm going to reach in there and grab that sling so it's all the way through and her leg's secure in there. Now I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to go ahead and take the other leg, and I'm going to go ahead and fold it underneath. Again, same fashion, and pull it through so it doesn't shear on the patient's skin. Once we get those legs in place, I'm going to go ahead and take the straps of the legs, crisscross them, because that's what we do for a seated transfer, and put them there. I'm going to go ahead and grab my sling bar. One of the nice things about Hill-Rom Leco products is that the sling bars are universal. So the same sling bar is on the Viking and the Gulbo and the overhead patient lifts, allowing for same application. I'm going to go ahead and bring the sling bar over here. I'm going to go ahead and attach the head here. I'm going to attach the head here. And then I'm going to do the same for the legs, attaching here. Grab the hand control. Explain to our patient what we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to go ahead and get you moved over to the chair. Raising them up. And again, it's important to work with the equipment together. So we're going to use the bed, make sure it's at a comfortable height, and then make sure that we just clear that surface. And then we're going to go ahead and bring her over to the chair. Get her seated in a nice, safe position using the straps on the back of the sling. I'm going to pull back a little bit and get her seated in there nice and neat so she can have a nice, comfortable seat. Lowering her down, getting her in that chair. Loops. Doing the reverse action. Now I'm going to show you how to ambulate your patient using our master vest. This is an ambulation device that can be used on a Gulbo, the Viking, and the overhead lifts.
There's a lot of different names and a lot of different lift companies have these. These are really nice. I've used them, they call them HOPS addresses, with the severely impaired crowd, which was kind of fun because they could move themselves around with just a little bit of movement. But for ceiling lifts are wonderful for this, as are transverse lifts, the ones that can go throughout the room, because it really gives people a lot of freedom. And this is something like what she's talking about right now, something more for a clinic.
I'm going to go ahead and take these arm loops and make sure her arm is through it. I'm going to attach the same arm loop and make sure her arm's through it, through there. Now that we've got our master vest attached to our sling bar, we're going to go ahead and ask our patient to stand up. Always remembering that the lift should not be doing all the lifting. The patient is actually ready to ambulate and be mobilized. So we want her to do that activity. So this is just for help and guidance. So we're going to go ahead and raise the lift up. And then as it's tightening, we want to make sure that the patient's standing slowly. And once we get into a nice secure position, she can go ahead and take a few steps.
And, you know, I love this as far as something to help people move things along. Although YouTube's really annoying with all their ads. So any questions? So I just want to show this real quick. This is the transverse lift. So 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 just obviously this is the charger that they have to push into, and then there's one that's charged right through the rail. Obviously the in-rail chargers are more expensive. But I do love the transverse ones.
Hey, Karen.
Uh-huh.
It's Amber. I wanted to point out that the sling that she used with that woman in the video, if you companies don't always want to order that divided leg sling because it's a little bit more expensive as it fits under the code, but then the people don't have to sit on the sling all day long. You can tuck it behind their back and under their legs.
I love
One
that.
thing I've noticed is that people get scared about sliding through. It's super important to have the right size, but if you've got someone really tall that needs a larger size for their height, they're going to fall through the hole. So if you take the far right side and go under both legs and the far left side and go under both legs, you can tighten it up a little bit and make them more secure.
Good to know. So I wanted to show you too. Go ahead. No, maybe this person doesn't. So then this is just one more. Just a second. Let me mute somebody. With this one, I really like it because it shows a different. Oh gosh, let me get this. Here we go. There, that should be better. Oh, no, I didn't mute the right person for a second. Again, if you could mute yourself, I'd appreciate it. I see how it is. Okay, I think I got everybody muted. Oops, that's not the one I wanted. So this I really liked. This is just another way to access the room, and it's just a different way to deal with a lift. So I just wanted to show you this too. So you go in and then you switch tracks, and a lot of times that works for. Let me show you one more time. A lot of times it's less expensive to have like a track system that you can just switch over. That would be less expensive, I would guess, than the turntable. But I just thought this is a really cool way to move through this. So I thought I'd share that with you. All of them, every single company's got their own thing. So this one was one we talked about last week with human care, and I think I showed it to you, but I want to show you again. This is one with human care lifts. One thing that I really think is cool is this one. It's called the Roomer 5200.
In preparation for transfer, the hoist must not be at maximum height.
And the nice thing about it is you can transfer between the tracks in the different rooms simply by using the straps instead of actually modifying the header.
Turn the lever on the hoist unit so that it points in the direction of intended transport. Levers are conveniently located on both sides of the unit. Press the up button on the hand control and hold it down to initiate client transfer to the other room. You will hear a click when the lift strap in the room you are leaving is freed. Unhook the free strap and hold it gently while it is automatically drawn back into the unit. The room-to-room transfer is now complete. Remember to reassure the client during the transfer. Strap and hook it onto the center support.
Just want to show you guys this one more time.
and hook it onto the center support hook. Turn the lever on the hoist unit so that it points in the direction of intended transport. Levers are conveniently located on both sides of the unit. Press the up button on the hand control and hold it down to initiate client transfer to the other room. You will hear a click when the lift strap in the room you are leaving is freed. Unhook the free strap and hold it gently while it is automatically drawn back into the unit. The room-to-room transfer is now complete.
So
remember to reassure the client during the transfer. A smile or a supporting arm is a good idea.
just throwing it out there too, a lot of these videos talk about, making sure you work through things with the person in the lift to make them feel safe and secure. So any questions up to this point? Anything you'd like to discuss?
Hey Karen, this is Judy Morris.
Hey, Judy Morris, how you doing, girl?
How are you? Good.
Pretty good.
Here's my observation just about doing these evals forever. I find that these are so expensive, but sometimes needed for those people who are severely impaired. But what I've recommended is just like, typically, if you're just a track over the bed where they can get from their bed to either their commode chair or their power chair, because these are the folks that are the most severely impaired. And
Right.
sometimes all you need is just that short track to get from bed to chair, and the rest, the tracks that run all the way through the house, I've just always found to be kind of more expensive than they're worth. So that's my 2 cents worth. So typically when I recommend one, it's just bed to chair, either chair or commode type thing.
Good point. I find that too, just because, like you said, they're so expensive, and you're just gonna, if it goes into the bathroom, you're just gonna put them in a bath chair anyway once they get there. Why not put them in a bath chair in the bedroom and save yourself $15,000?
That's exactly what I think. And if they're that impaired, they're going to be going back to bed to get dressed or whatever anyway. So
Right. So one thing is, when you put the lifts just for the bed, a lot of times, and I didn't have time to draw it, a lot of times the builders, I find, and I don't know if you run into this too, Judy, they just want to put a track straight across the middle of the bed, so it's horizontal to the bed. This one right here being vertical to the bed, which actually looks opposite now. But so what a lot of times I find the builders want to do is put the track across the bed. And the problem with doing that is it can be really hard to position people, especially when they're really heavy. Um, if it's just right in the middle of the bed, because then you have to try to push it and pull it so they're positioned well while you're putting it down. When I first started doing these, we'd put them across the bed, and people would not like them. We had to pull out 2 different ones, so we quit doing that. Now, whenever I recommend a ceiling lift, either it goes lengthwise down the bed to the end, depending on how big the person is, how much clearance there is for the ceiling, because you have to have enough clearance over the foot of the bed to be able to get them to go straight past the bed. That's the cheapest way, if you just go lengthwise all the way down, and it allows you, the caregiver, to reposition the person easily within the bed. I often do the 90-degree turns, even though they're more expensive. That way, you're not trying to lift somebody over the foot of the bed, and you can just turn and then put them in their wheelchair, or like their rolling commode chair, their rolling shower chair, like Judy was talking about.
I'm having a hard time visualizing if you go horizontal to the bed instead of perpendicular to the bed. How does the track work so that it takes them from over to the edge of the bed? It's like you would need 2 tracks, right?
I wish I would have just closed that out. It's going to take me a while to find it. Can you see the bed in this one? Like, here's the bed right here.
Yes.
So um, if it goes across just like this, back and forth, so it goes the width of the bed and not the length of the bed,
Mm-hmm.
they can position them anywhere lengthwise in the bed. It's just they can't position them back in like where their head goes. Does that make sense? Maybe I didn't answer it correctly.
I guess I'm still stuck on how you get them from the bed to over to the edge, because it's like the track goes like head to toe.
Right. So you have to have either this 90-degree turn, so you lift them up and then it turns. And like
So you
for
need
instance,
2 tracks then? Is that, or at least 1 track that does a 90-degree?
yeah, one track that does a 90-degree. The other
Got
thing people will if you really want to try to save money, you can just do one long track and then lift them over the foot of the bed. But I've had people complain about that. They don't like getting lifted above the bed. I don't know why, above the foot, but it's something I've gotten a lot of complaints about. But
So when you do the, is it 1 track with a U shape, or do you have like a transition?
it's one track that has a 90-degree turn.
Okay.
Basically it's 2 tracks. It's like this is like a 5-foot track here, a 90-degree turn, and then a 5-foot track. But if we instead just did 2 straight tracks, it'd be much less expensive because this 90-degree turn track is at least 1.5 times more expensive than a straight track, if not 2 times expensive. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. But again, for this one, we were doing the same. When we did this design for this edition, we did just what Judy was talking about. Instead of running this into the bathroom, so you could access the bathroom, this woman has a catheter and she does her bowel program in bed. But I guess we could put her on the, she's a high level quad, so you can't just set her on the toilet. You'd have to have some sort of a toileting device. I would assume a RAS commode shower chair. But again, if you're going to do that, have a RAS commode shower chair so they can access the commode and the shower, why bother running the track all the way in there? It's a little unsightly as well. Plus, it allows you to close the door and, use the bathroom without everybody being able to hear you. It lends a lot more as far as privacy goes.
Karen, it's Julie. Can I ask a question about pricing and
Yeah.
flexibility? I was just thinking, I mean, I know I don't really know pricing yet, but like XY gantry would give you so much flexibility if you just did it in the bedroom, I would think, because if you
Right.
move furniture around or needs change or, just gives you. So I wanted to kind of ask how that compares to what you were talking about with the 90-degree turn, the curved idea.
So the transverse lifts are more expensive, except if there's an issue as far as with the transverse lifts, the ones I see most are the ones that are wall mounted, and it's much cheaper to mount them in the wall than it is to do a fixed track in the ceiling typically. Because of that, I think I've been seeing a lot more of the transverse lifts, but typically just a straight ceiling mount track, if the ceiling joists or the trusses are okay, that would be your least expensive. And then a straight track with a 90-degree turn, again, if you've got solid blocking already set up in the ceiling where you don't have to add anything, that would probably be the second least expensive. And the third least expensive would be these transverse lifts that are wall mounted. And then more expensive would be the ones that are the transverse lifts that are ceiling mounted. But I don't know about anyone else, but I haven't been seeing a whole lot of the wall mounted or the ceiling mounted transverse lifts lately. And go ahead.
Do all vendors sell the different kinds of lifts, or do you have to know which vendors to go to if you want a transverse lift versus, a ceiling mounted lift versus, all the different options.
Yeah, well, the transverse lifts I really started seeing coming out, and maybe somebody else has seen something else, but I really started experiencing them maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. Before that, I wasn't seeing them at all. Um, and I think since they've come out, I think most of the lift companies have an option for the gantry lifts where, it, it's basically a stand that you put them on. The fixed tracks lift, everybody seems to have the fixed track lift, but then, and everybody seems to have the transverse lift. Now everybody's got their own version. What I tend to do is I work a lot with a company called CareLink. And so what I'll do is I'll have the CareLink installer meet me out at the house unless I really know exactly what I want to do. And we'll just discuss it. And for instance, CareLink has Handy Move, they have Human Care, and they have Savaria. So, a lot of times we'll talk about, what's the weight limit? What are we going to use it for? How does it mount? And then they just decide which lift will work the best within the parameters that we're dealing with. So I hope that makes sense where you can, I find I don't have to know everything about the lifts. I need to know enough where I can say, hey, I think for this, we need a transverse lift because, I want the person to be able to walk around in their room. We've got lots of different things we need to access. The transverse lift rocks, let's do this. But, in other cases, you just need the ceiling track. And one thing that I've done before too, in older houses with smaller bathrooms, sometimes there's just nothing you can do with that as far as modifying it to make it work for someone. And so using a ceiling lift instead of, making the bathroom bigger often works too. It's really kind of a fun way to get around obstacles in the built environment. Because not everything you can't get a rolling commode chair in every single bathroom, I think, as we all have probably experienced. So anybody else have thoughts or questions or anything with these ceiling lifts? I hope it's clear. I tried to make it a little more clear, have a little more video visuals today. So HMOTA has we have two different dealerships currently with ceiling lift companies. One is with Hoycher, which is also called Barrier Free Lifts. They're based in Florida. We can usually get those installed in some places around the United States. We just put together an agreement with Human Care. They were the ones who did the presentation last week. They're the ones who have that roomer, so you don't have to modify the door headers. I haven't seen a lot of options like that roomer, so that really excites me. But with Human Care, they're going to be giving us like a 30 to 40% discount on the equipment, not on the installation. So if you have someone that you need a ceiling lift for, again, we've got Horcher and we've got Human Care, and with both of those, we can get discounts and they will install it. The thing is, Human Care has really strong coverage throughout the Southwest and California, but the rest of the United States, they don't have such good coverage for. I know they said last night, if you give them enough lead time, they can cover anything in the area. I don't find that to be the case. I've tried to send them several different jobs where they couldn't do it. It was just a little bit of a nightmare, and I had to find other people last minute. But this is something that we're going to have options with HMOTA to be able to install. If you want to do a ceiling lift with us, let us know. We'll get and we'll set up for the evaluation, and then either we can give the person the quote on our letterhead, or we can give it to you and you can put it on your letterhead, whatever works best. So, oops, that's from a previous presentation. So, one thing I would really recommend is draw a couple rooms in your house, a bedroom and a bathroom, something like that, and then, figure out the best solution for the ceiling lift. One thing that I do if I'm running a ceiling lift from the bedroom into the bathroom is I try to design the bathroom so I have as few turns as possible. So it's a straight shot from, wherever it is I'm at into wherever I want to go. But, give it some thought, practice a little, practice your design, see how it works. If you get a chance to stop in someplace that has ceiling lifts, go in and play with them. I think they're a lot of fun, and it gives you a good idea of what's going on and how they work in ways that watching a video isn't going to help you with. And if you do get your client a ceiling lift or a freestanding lift, I always ask for two or three different kinds of slings to trial, and I typically find that my vendors can do that for me. So do that, and make sure that you spend some time training the people on how to use the lift, because it's just like I just had a woman with multiple sclerosis. They couldn't use the lift because they didn't have the right sling. I got them the right sling, but then we went back and forth. I went back over to their house probably 4 times before they were really able to demonstrate the use of the sling and the lift for me, where I felt like they were comfortable, so they'd actually do it when I wasn't there. All right. So if you haven't done it already, please put your name and email address in the chat so we can send you your CAP certificate. Gail's got some other courses starting up pretty soon. Oh, shoot, I just did that again. And if you want to look at her courses, I think she's got one starting in March. I know I can't even do this. I know she had one that started in February, but again, I think she's got one starting in March too. If you're interested in a CAPS class, I'll put this in the chat if I can find the chat. Oh, here it is.
Karen, do the videos from these presentations live in the members only section on
Yes.
HMOTA.org? Okay.
In fact, and this one will be uploaded by Thursday. In fact, I'll try to remember to send out an email link so people can find it pretty easy. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Happy President's Day. And we'll see you next time. And again, we've been pretty busy with evaluations. Thank you to everyone who's coming and doing the evaluations with us. And big thanks to the lead OTs who are working with different people.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, thank you. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.